makes me reflect on the things that we see in pro shops.
Yes.
So things like chocolate,
Yes.
like flapjacks, like sports drinks. Thoughts on those as kind of options?
I can give somebody, and we'll probably come to this today, an on-course strategy. So what to eat on the course at what hole, bang, bang and bang. I was fortunate enough that I worked with the Open, so I put the menus together and they abide by my suggestions. Good quality choices not only can help our immediate performance, but our long-term health as well.
So you're telling me they don't have a pint of Guinness at 10 a.m. and then have a fry up and go tee off?
Everything in moderation, including moderation, right?
Absolutely correct, Zach. Yeah, spot on.
Hello and welcome to the Golf Science Podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Thompson, your golf science educator. Now, in this podcast, we explore the latest research in golf science, talking to sports science researchers from around the world in the areas of nutrition, psychology, biomechanics, strength and conditioning, as well as other sports science disciplines. We take a deep dive into their research, looking at what they did, as well as looking at how the findings are useful for playing professionals, coaching professionals, and amateur golfers. Now, before we get stuck in today, I need to introduce my co-host, Lewis Downey, PGA Pro. How you doing, mate? Good to see you today.
I'm good, thank you, mate. Yeah, good to be here again, and obviously every week's different, so learning new stuff every week, so it's awesome.
Well, how did the speed sticks discussion go last week for you? Have you still got a speed stick now, or have you managed to put that on eBay?
No. I've still got them. I still feel they have relevance in my coaching bag. So they're still there. I have used them over the last week. Actually, it kind of prompted me a little bit. So yeah. No, I feel like they've still got a role.
Yeah. Well, we did discuss that, didn't we? Around kind of how they can be useful potentially to get people to do a warm up and actually start to engage with warming up before golf, and also the training kind of program aspect of it too. So there's definitely value. Potentially value. But potentially not from a warm-up perspective.
No, I mean, like, I think from an initial warm-up to just get you moving, fine. Like, if that's kind of like using something that doesn't have that face orientation, like we talked about. Mm-hmm. But in regards to, like, actually just getting the physical elements of your body to move better, getting that sort of kinematic sequence to start working well, then I see it as a benefit.
Yeah, I agree. And today, obviously, we're talking about golf nutrition. So, from your perspective, what do you actually do? When you play in a comp, what do you actually eat before you play? What do you bring in your bag?
I have good intentions, but probably don't do the right things. I'm certainly not pounding down chocolate bars, I know that. I do try and stay hydrated. Before the round could probably be better. I am aware when my sort of mental capacity just starts to die off. It's normally when I've made a double bogey, something like that. In regards to what I'm aware, I'm fairly sure, like, stuff with sustained, slow release energy. I've always had that sort of pounded down me. Low GI foods, glycemic index, is that right? Stuff like that.
No knowledge
sure
from me.
These other guys will tell us in a minute. But I know that we don't want like sugar rushes. We want to have a nice, good, solid level blood sugar throughout the round. So mine probably isn't like that. But in here, I've got the right knowledge. It's just obviously putting it into practice.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, when I used to compete, I used to my weird and novel way of feeding myself before the round is I used to make some porridge in the morning. I used to put it in a sandwich bag, and then I used to chop the bottom off. So effectively, it's like icing thing. And I used to bring that with me on the course to, like, before I was walking around and kind of eating it as I was going. So that was my kind of strategy, interesting way.
Love it. A little piping bag.
Yeah. Right, well, brilliant. Let's also introduce our second guest today to help us explore this research area. So today we've got with us Zach Williams. He is the co-founder of Dryforce. So welcome onto the show. Zach, how are you?
Hey, Dan. Very good. It's, early 4 a.m. here in Boston, Mass, but I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
You are welcome, and thank you for joining us today. Just want to firstly kind of introduce you, because I'm aware that our listeners may be wondering what Drive Force is. So can you just give us a brief synopsis of kind of Drive Force?
Yeah, of course. I think Drive Force as a company is trying to be a better brand of sports nutrition in that I'm the lead formulator, and my goal is to make products which are both exceptionally good for the performance that it's geared towards, but also exceptionally healthy. And I think the example I'll give is the pre-workouts. They might be really good for someone for a 2-hour gym session, but they're not necessarily something you would recommend that a person consume on a regular basis for a variety of reasons. And then, our current niche target is helping golfers. I'll actually relate it to something Luis just described. So I'm actually not the golfer in the group. My younger brother is, and it was at his suggestion that we look at golf. And when I took a few interviews with golfers to understand better the physical requirements, I noted a very common series of symptoms that I associated with dehydration and fatigue that were especially happening in the later rounds. And then when I would ask people, what are your nutritional protocols? Forget when you're playing with your friends and betting, like when you're actually going to go for your amateur card or, out there to play like an actual tour around. The responses were largely, I don't know, I want to do it, but I don't, or I forget while I'm playing. And that coupled with the discovery that as an athlete with very unique requirements, golfers were by and large being underserved by, what I interpreted as established methods in sports nutrition that could be used to deliver a circumstance where they wouldn't have to experience these very common issues of fatigue and dehydration.
Yeah.
I put together a product which I believe would solve for that, and we validated it with pros, and so far that's what we're riding on, is DF18.
Brilliant. Great stuff. So obviously today we're going to be talking all around golf nutrition, and to do that we need to introduce our main guest here today, Professor Graham Close from Liverpool John Moores University. So welcome to the podcast, Graham.
Hi Daniel, thanks for inviting me.
Well, thank you for being on today. Just to give the listeners a little bit about your background, Graham is a former professional rugby league player and is now Professor of Human Physiology at Liverpool John Moores University. Graham is a fellow of both the British Association of Sports and Exercise Sciences and the European College of Sports Sciences. He is the head of nutrition for England Rugby, the DP World Tour, and the Ryder Cup team. His research is focused on basic and applied sports nutrition, where he's published over 150 papers, book chapters, and review articles. Is there anything else in that list there, Graham, that I've missed for you?
I think that's more or less covered it quite nicely, yeah, thank you.
Oh, good man. Good stuff. Are you a golfer yourself as well?
Depends what you classify as a golfer. I certainly carry a bag of sticks around a golf course on a regular basis and do my very best to get it into the hole in as few shots as possible. But I don't know if I'd go as far as classifying myself as a golfer.
No, fair enough. I think quite a few will fall in that same camp as well.
Yeah.
So today, obviously, we're going to chat to you about your recent chapter that you co-authored in the Handbook of Golf Science, which is obviously focused around the nutrition for golf. Now, just as Zach alluded to there, really, personally, from my kind of opinion and view, I think nutrition has often kind of been neglected by golfers, and also very little attention in the golfing industry with its link to performance. So I was hoping kind of today, well, firstly, do you agree with that? And secondly, I was hoping to kind of today get a bit of a 101 or nutrition 101, if that's possible.
Yeah, first of all, yes, I do agree with it. And as an academic researcher, I also think it's been neglected from a research perspective. So I've written book chapters in science and football, science and rugby, lots of different sports where I've written the book chapter. And the one in the Handbook of Golf was the hardest book chapter I've ever had to write. And that's basically because when you start to write a book chapter, you normally would review literature and then come to a conclusion. But there's virtually no literature out there, and the literature that is, it's pretty basic, really. It looks like it's student projects that just needed a quick dissertation, rather than well-studied randomized control trials. So what we've had to do is borrow literature from other sports and then try and translate it. And that's quite hard to do because in many ways it is quite a unique sport with the walking and the intermittent little boats of activity. So, yeah, difficult. And then from the applied side of things, I think what we're seeing now is a massive change. So, I got into golf nutrition maybe 7 or 8 years ago. It's actually probably getting close to a decade now. And at the time, it was quite unusual for golfers to want nutrition support. Yesterday, I spent 4 hours on Zoom calls to DP World Tour players and some of the best players on tour who are now all really embracing this and realizing that it can make a huge difference. And we might touch on this as we work our way through. And where I think it makes a huge difference to the professional golfer isn't necessarily where people think, which is obviously fueling around. I think that's really important. But where I think it makes a big difference to a professional golfer is keeping them well for 12 months of the year, keeping them energized on day 4 of a round, helping them with travel strategies, and just making sure that the food that they're eating is conducive to long-term health, as opposed to convenience food in a clubhouse and snack food bought in a pro shop that you throw in your bag. And I don't think it takes a professor to realise that convenience food bought in a pro shop combined with food, burgers and chips bought in a clubhouse, doing that multiple times a day, isn't going to be conducive not only to your performance but to your long-term health.
Yeah, and I get your point exactly there, especially with those professional players who are playing over a 4-day tournament, that the compounded fatigue element and the kind of the amount they're pushing their body over those 4 days. I guess that's when the nutrition really comes into its own, if that makes sense.
So you're telling me they don't have a pint of Guinness at 10 a.m. and then have a fry up and go tee off?
Do you know what? I can see in your picture behind you, the 150th Open, and it would have been great for you to have seen. I think that was one of the better setups that we've managed. I was fortunate enough that I work with the Open, so I put the menus together and they abide by my suggestions. And rather than a pint of Guinness in the morning, we've got a smoothie bar now. So there's a fresh smoothie station. We've got chefs doing fresh omelettes and different styles of eggs that are being made freshly to order. They make our homemade snacks to take onto the course. We've got a juice bar. So, if the lads are feeling a bit run down, we can have juices that are, energizing, immune supporting, etc. So I think it's probably the sport that's come the furthest in the last 5 to 10 years, and unrecognisable, I would say, to what most people might think is pre-golf nutrition.
That sort of setup at a tournament, would I be right in saying that at a football club or a rugby club, is it similar at their training grounds?
Yes. Yeah, and to be fair, as Pablo Picasso said, wasn't it, that a good artist copy and great artist steal? A lot of the nutrition guidance that I've put together for the European or the DP Tour and Ryder Cup, etc., are basically adaptations of what I've put together for the likes of England Rugby or Everton Football Club when I was working there. The principles stay the same. It's just often the volumes that change and some of the subtleties of it. But yeah, if you was to walk into the Players' Lounge at the BMW at Wentworth, for example, it's exactly the type of things that you would expect if you walked into a Premier League football ground.
Got it. Yeah, success leaves clues, right? So you're just, like you say, changing the volumes to suit the actual energy output and the mental, fatigue that they're going to face.
Yeah, exactly. Now, obviously, there's other challenges quite unique to golf as well that we need to try and deal with. But ultimately, yeah, we we've got maybe 10 or 15 years now of real good experience working in elite sport and knowing what works, what doesn't work. Even in how it's presented makes a big difference, or the layout of it. So when you go into these buffet style players lounges, even the way that you're setting it up, where how you're putting nudges to nudge them to make the right decision. I'm not the type of nutritionist who wants to ban anything, but I just want to nudge you towards the right decision most of the time, and just little subtle. What do you see first? Will make a big difference. Where do we put the snacks? Where do we put the hydration stations? How are we going to try and encourage them to make the right calls? All these little things can play a big part in what we do.
And on the golf course as well. Weirdly, I'd say golf is probably one of the only sports where you actually have the most opportunity to hydrate yourself and eat compared to other sports.
Yeah, correct. And it's got its own challenges. Such as keeping water cool, for example, because obviously we're very fortunate that our sport follows the sun. So we're not like looking out my window today where all I can see is snow. We follow the sun, don't we? So keeping things like the hydration cool and keeping snacks cool, and then the challenge is making sure that the players have access to take good snacks onto the course. And as I say, doing that at the British Open, or the Open, sorry, I'll get in trouble for going to the British Open. Doing that,
don't do that.
Yeah, no.
Sorry, I'll get. Doing that at the Open Championship is quite easy when budgets are really solid and chefs are able to make the foods we want, and you'll go into a player's locker area and there'll be a fridge with grab and go items like banana breads, muesli bars, wraps, so they can pick them up and take them onto a course. I guess my challenge is to make sure that there's options also available on other tours like the Challenge Tour, so actually the players are still able to, because it's all well and good doing it in ideal situations, but how do you help the emerging golfer and the next generation of golfers? And that's something that my team who work for the European Tour and the DP Tours, etc., are really keen on trying to do, simplify these messages to make it available for everybody.
Yeah, there's an emerging tour called the Clutch Tour as well, which is coming out there as well. The Clutch Tour, that's probably worth you guys speaking to. Maybe I'd imagine there's a lot of players that play on that, not speaking for all of them, that probably don't eat right, hydrate right, or train right in the gym. I'm not saying all of them, but I'd imagine a lot of them have just got a basic nutrition and not really doing it the proper way.
Yeah, correct. And I think what's massively important is for the emerging golfer to realise the importance that the elite golfers put on it. So, like I say, yesterday I spent hours on Zoom calls, and we're looking at least 2, if not 3 of them players who will be in the Ryder Cup team. So, the people at the very top of the game have really begun to embrace this. And I think one of the best things that happened to nutrition was when Tiger Woods came along, and suddenly treated the game like an athlete. And then obviously the likes of Rory, has picked up on this and taken it to probably even a new level of professionalism. And when the emerging golfers see how seriously these lot are taking it, and the fact that they have got structured eating plans, and you see the food choices we're making in the clubhouse, because we do have non-athlete foods available in the players' lounges, because the not unfortunate, that's a bad way to put it, the reality is that in the players' lounge we're not just feeding the players, we're feeding the families and the children. So it can't all be quinoa and sweet potato and sea bass. But what you see is the very top players generally go for the quinoa and the sea bass and the sweet potato, and then that spreads, because you do see younger players seeing what the other people have got on the plate, and it slowly does begin to nudge people towards them better choices.
Yeah, I think part of that's... No, go on, Lewis. There you go, mate, you go.
No, it was just a joke. I thought you were going to say, just in case they miss the cut, they can go back to normal food.
Having some food in there for that situation. it's probably not a bad shout either. I've made a couple of mistakes in my nutrition career where one of them was with England rugby, and I can talk about it because two of the players mention it in their autobiographies. It was a tradition, but the day before a game with England rugby, they had these big chocolate biscuits that are made by the hotel. And the nutritionist, or one nutritionist who you might be looking at, or you might not, thought it was a good idea to get rid of them biscuits because health-wise, they're probably not the best.
Are you talking the little biscuits that just sat on their pillow?
Oh no, these are big, chunky,
right? Okay,
massive things made by the hotel that taste like little drops of heaven or big chunks of heaven. So yeah, that wasn't my wisest decision. And then from a golf perspective, there's often like afternoon tea, so cakes and tea in the clubhouse for the end of play. And yeah, that's probably not my wisest decision to have tried to remove that either. So look, it's about making sure that the options are needed for optimizing performance are there, but also remembering that, life's about living and having a bit of fun as well, isn't it? And, we can put them enjoyable foods into a diet at the right time as well. And, I perhaps made a mistake in the past of going too far, of trying to make everything performance related, and, remembering that, food is mood, and actually you can pick up mood by some treats.
Everything in moderation, including moderation, right?
Absolutely correct, Zach. Yeah, spot on.
So what you've kind of identified there is that kind of they've got getting this awareness over the last few years in the top of the game, and hopefully that's beginning to kind of trickle down to the lower levels. And I guess part of that is knowledge and awareness, isn't it, really, about that nutrition can impact your golfing performance, and actually knowledge as well around what is good to eat. And I think that's often, I guess, can be a barrier from kind of the lay golfer perspective on the ground, of thinking, well, I don't have a smoothie bar like they've got at the Open, or I haven't got a nice, like, lovely oat-related snack that I can kind of throw in my bag kind of thing. I guess it's the awareness of what's good to eat, but then also that a little bit of time potentially for preparing can kind of go a long way to helping with that.
Yeah, I had a golfer yesterday who a real deep thinker, and there's a great question. He said to me at the end of it, right, if you was to give me like 3 key words that you think would help with my nutrition, what would it be? And I was like, what a great question that is. It's almost like a podcast interview. And one of them I did say was understanding. And the reason that I put that in is that I can give somebody, and we'll probably come to this today, an on-course strategy. So what to eat on the course at what hole, bang, bang, and bang.
Yeah.
Now I can tell you what to eat. So let's say we go a muesli bar or a banana at hole 4, a chicken wrap at the turn, and we go a muesli bar or a banana at 14. Well, then what happens if we get to a course and we can't get a muesli bar or a banana? What do they then eat? We don't know, because I've given them the what but not the why. If I then explain to them what I'm trying to do is get carbohydrates into you, 4, 10 and 14, and mid-round I want some protein in there as well. So these are foods that are great carbohydrate-based foods on the course, and this is a good protein option. Well, then actually, if a chicken wrap's not available, they can make us an alternate. Or if a banana's not available, they might make a better alternate. So, correct, that understanding basically the why as well as the what is really important. And then the other key word I give him was like consistency. So actually, a golfer's got enough decisions to make on a golf course. I wouldn't like to think how many decisions you've got to make on a golf course. Probably more than any other sport, I would think. The last thing you want to be thinking about is when do I eat and why. And so let's just get a routine going. Right, this is what you do. So it becomes a no-brainer that your putter goes in your bag at hole 4 and your banana comes out. You're not even thinking about it. It's just a habit. At the turn, your sandwich comes out. At 14, your next bit of carbohydrate comes out. Right, not even a decision anymore. Same with the hydration. Maybe I'm jumping ahead here, but I try and get them into the habit of when the putter goes in the bag, the water bottle comes out. You're not then, how many of us have got to the end of a round and looked in our golf bag and the water bottle we bought in the club shop is still in the golf bag and we've not even lifted it out?
Well, I looked at my golf bag a little while ago, and I had maybe food that I had in there from about a week ago, which wasn't good.
Correct. So we're getting habits and consistency. So I like that mentality that when the putter goes in the bag, the water bottle comes out and you carry it to the next tee. So even if you don't drink it, you get into that habit. If it's in your hand, the chance are you're going to take a little sip, and
Yeah.
you're not then forgetting about it. And it's just part of the habit. We just build these habits, and I talk to the golfers as well. I give them checklists. So when you're doing your bag and your caddy's checking have you got everything you need, put on that checklist your 4, 10, 14 foods. Maybe put a little, get your caddy to put a little dot on hole 4, 10 and 14 so he knows to hand you. And if you're not going to caddy, like people like myself, just make that little mark on the card yourself. So you've got your little F on 4, 10 and 14. You're reminding yourself to actually have that food. And then we're not in that mad situation where you spot it when you're putting your glove away on 18 and you notice you've got some food in your bag that you've not eaten.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great piece of advice. And from that first point you said there around the knowledge then, so actually them understanding not just, I need to eat a banana here, I need to eat this here, understanding what they're having when, so the carbohydrates, the protein, those kind of things. Let's delve a little bit into that then, just to give the listeners a bit of an awareness of, well, why do we need carbohydrates? What are they? What's the purpose of them within sport and kind of within a golfing context?
Yeah, and this is where I said that the book chapter I wrote was difficult, because most sports you would talk off as saying that carbohydrate is a main fuel for virtually all sports, particularly with a high intensity nature to it. And then obviously you can make an argument that golf isn't that high intensity and that. And the research, there isn't really that strong research around it, but there is some suggesting that towards the end of a round, blood sugar can be dropped by as much as 30% if we've not eaten during the round. And we know that can increase perceptions of fatigue, decision making, focus. So I would say that's probably the main reason that we're looking to maintain some nutrition from a carbohydrate perspective, to maintain steady blood glucose concentration, maintain our own concentration, and delay these feelings of fatigue that we often get during a round. And I think of myself about decision making towards the end of a round. How often have we done something that's just completely crazy, a really poor decision, and can we tie that to our nutrition? So even though the research isn't solid, I've certainly seen in applied practice, if we get a consistent carbohydrate feed of, as you said at the beginning, slow releasing, low glycemic index carbohydrates, we do seem to maintain a performance. What we also need to think about from the elite end as well is long-term health, and and we know about a relationship between carbohydrates and protein and the immune system. So our ability to fight off infections and things like that. So yeah, and then the final thing I would say is that you're on a golf course these days for the best part of 5 hours, unfortunately. The pros because we take the time, and us hackers because someone's hacking about in the woods in front of you and won't let us play through. So you're on there for a long time. You don't want to spend in 5 hours of your day eating sweets and chocolate bars, because it's a long time of the day. And if we're doing that consistently, that's not conducive to long-term health. So good quality choices not only can help our immediate performance, but our long-term health as well.
Yes, so that kind of makes me reflect on the things that we see in pro shops.
Yes.
So things like chocolate,
Yes.
like flapjacks, like sports drinks. Thoughts on those as kind of options?
Yeah, I think most of the times things like that aren't the best idea. The problem is that most people would prefer to eat a chocolate bar than a banana, or a homemade type of bar, and then they probably don't think about taking a sandwich or taking a wrap or some food out that's got a bit more quality to it for halfway around. In terms of the traditional sports drinks, again, I'm not convinced that's a way forward. I think on a hot day, it's probably important that we replace some electrolytes. We can sweat quite a lot, but that doesn't need to be highly caffeinated, highly sugared. drinks either. So I think we can do things a lot better than what is conveniently available in shops. And I hope I'm not doing any golf shops out of any business here. But I am beginning to see better options available.
No, I mean, Graham, like what you said about the sports drink solutions not being adequate or improper, even. I mean, there's a couple bits of research on manual labor in the hot sun that can see a person losing up to 600 milligrams of sodium per hour. Now, a golfer is not performing manual labor, but across 3 to 6 hours, I can imagine, they could be getting somewhere close to an average of 600 milligrams of sodium per, every 2-3 hours. And if you're looking at what's the most common solution, like a Gatorade or a Powerade, each serving of those has, anywhere from 200 to 250 milligrams of sodium. And if we know that maintaining sodium levels is absolutely imperative to maintaining blood volume, which is imperative for transference of nutrients and oxygen throughout your circulatory system, you're operating at an increasing deficit unless you're pounding multiple sports drinks, every 2 hours across an 18-round, game. So even in that regard, those solutions are subpar.
Yeah. So we have a very much a food first philosophy on the tour. So where we can get our nutrition in food, we do, and that's correct. But one of the exceptions we do make to that is there are certain tournaments, and I'm thinking particularly towards the Dubai end when we're out there, where we will provide electrolyte tablets. So the high sodium, high magnesium tablets that they can add into the water. So they're not taking lots of sugared, caffeinated drinks that are commercially available. And as you know, most commercially available sports drinks aren't high enough in the sodium, partly because it's not aimed at and it sounds ridiculous, but a lot of these drinks aren't aimed at a sports market. They're aimed at a general consumer. And if you made them taste salty enough, the general consumer probably wouldn't drink them. So we do tend to use little tubes of electrolytes and things like that, particularly in hot weather to maintain hydration. But on top of that, Zach, we'll also make sure that they get the sodium right before and after the round too. So I'm a big fan of like salty soups, on a hot day. So it's an easy way to get lots of liquid and salt in. People generally don't mind drinking quite a salty soup, but if you give them that in just a normal drink, they will be like, "Oh, that's far too salty." So, I think we often under-emphasize what we can do electrolyte-wise in food.
Yeah, absolutely. There's also, just in the realm of the sports nutrition, other ingredients that can improve, like, both the retention and efficiency of hydration in your body. So, one of my favorite ingredients that I put into DF18 was a patented form of glycerol, which I'm sure you're familiar, but, it can raise blood serum osmolality and basically improve total body water retention and maintaining of blood volume. And then taurine is another favorite of mine, in particular because of its ability to act as an osmo-effector. And in that regard, it helps the movement of water in and out of your cells, i.e. supporting the, sodium-potassium pump. And so in conjunction with both fluids and a good electrolyte regimen, you can extend the life cycle of fluids in your body while they're being used more efficiently for the purposes of hydration.
But Graham, from your, like you said, when you're talking about kind of replacing or doing the Golf Pro out of business, I think almost this education piece can almost be if it means they then have to stop getting as many chocolate bars in, but they have to try and get in potentially some, like you say, some chicken wraps in their fridge, or if they try and get some, if it's like a really hot day, they sell some of those electrolyte tablets or something similar in the shop. Those kind of things potentially is where they can just shift, I guess, potentially their thing, if that makes sense.
It is, and it'll be a slow burner because, Luke, I think sometimes it's just an excuse to eat a chocolate bar, isn't it? Like most people enjoy a chocolate bar, and it's a good excuse. And I think part of the danger is there's been a lot of poor information in the literature about the energy expenditure of a round of golf, and it's nowhere near as high as what people think. So there is some reports of like 2.5 to 3,000 calories for a round of golf. That's more than running a marathon. And we've all played a game of golf, but none of us have come off thinking we've run a marathon.
Yeah.
So I got one of the top players to wear an activity monitor for me in this year's Open, and he was coming out at around somewhere between 500 and 800 calories per round, which is about what I've seen using better equipment on the lesser standard golfer. But that was at the 150th Open, so that's what I think, around about 500 or 800 calories. So it's no wonder that some people have 2 or 3 chocolate bars and then go and have a burger and chips at the end and a couple of pints, and they wonder why they're not getting the health benefits that they thought they might get from playing golf. Well, you've just, certainly from an energy balance perspective, you've just completely negated it. So what we're better doing is making much better choices, and that's why I don't think there's a massive need for traditional like sugary drinks, cokes, and things like that. One, we don't need that rapid sugar release, and two, for anyone who's using the game of golf to try and help with long-term weight maintenance, then actually an understanding that whilst there's massive benefits to playing golf, physical, mental, agility, strength, psychological, and walking, it is 500 to 800 calories. It's not 2 to 3,000 that's been inappropriately put in the literature.
Yeah, Zach and Graham, you fill me in a little bit more on this actually, because I think we spoke before, Zach, didn't we, about Whoop? And does Whoop actually measure like energy and output?
It attempts to, but anything to measure energy expenditure is difficult. Let's just put that out there. And there is actually, it was actually Whoop that I was referring to, but one of the players wore for me during the 150th and sent me the data. And I think it's reasonable. There was a big problem at first with whooping golfers when they were wearing it on the wrist. And what you was finding was, because of the rapid arm swings, it was massively overestimating. So even the placement of these trackers are important. You'll see a lot more golfers now wear it on the upper arm when they wear it.
Yeah.
Obviously not moving as much. And with a lot of these trackers, the more information you can put into it, the better information you get out of it.
Yep.
So if you can start putting more details about you and Matt into it, I think the energy expenditure stuff of Whoop there is some research out there showing that it isn't bad at all, really. And some things like resting heart rate, where I get a little bit more dubious is when things like recovery and scores that things give you, and heart rate variability. I think
strain and stuff like that as well, right, Graham?
Yeah, and where do these numbers come from? Which a lot of it comes from HRV, heart rate variability, and that's a really difficult thing to measure in a controlled laboratory setting. So, whilst I think the technology is coming on lots to measure it, I don't know if I'm convinced on it yet. But look, that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
I think there is a lot of good we can get from Whoop. Before people get me wrong, I think there are good numbers that you can get from it, which will certainly help.
I've used it, and
Sorry, I just wanted to say that when it comes to the trackers, the reason I like Whoop in particular has little to do with the technology per se, because as you can even see, they sell you the wristband for $30. It's clearly not the mainstay of their business, but they've been around for so long. And their entire business model is structured around the data collection and drawing conclusions and correlations between it and health markers. And so you're buying the analytics. It's imperfect, as Graham was alluding to, but in the world of understanding what those measurements mean for our health and wellness, they're at the forefront of the analysis at the moment, which is why I like them. That's my main point.
Did you say you use it, Lewis, or?
I have done. I used it for about a year and a half, and I don't know, I stopped using it. It was nothing wrong with it. I was just tracking. I was doing it for tracking my sleep because my sleep was rubbish. But I just found like I started sleeping better, and I didn't really need it for the other data, like personally. So I stopped using it because they charge you a monthly fee, which is obviously their business plan, which is also a model, which is great for them. But I just didn't find I needed it anymore. But I did while I was using it. I found it useful. I know someone that uses an Aura ring, which is like a similar thing, and then which is obviously not that practical for golf, probably. And then I've used a MyZone belt as well, which is only for in workout stuff. So I actually wore a MyZone belt on a round of golf, and again, just showing what Graham said about the calories. The MyZone belt come out at about just over 1,000 calories after playing a round of golf. So maybe I'd hit a few more shots than the Tour Pros. I'm not sure, but
only a few, Lewis. Only a few, pal.
What a lot of them fail to consider, and that might be what has gone on there, is the energy expenditure that you would spend sat on your backside doing nothing, which is about a calorie a minute. So if you was on the course for 5 hours, you would do about 300 calories if you were sat doing nothing. So the energy expenditure of that round then, according to that, might be 600 to 700, which is about right. What we're talking about is your expenditure above RMR, which I don't think a lot of people have taken into account, Matt. So we said, right, I'm playing a game of golf, that's 1,000, I can add that onto my day. But actually, no, you need to subtract 300 or 400 that you've already accounted for in your day anyway, because you're still going to be using that.
So to shift gear a little bit then, we've spoken quite a bit there about carbohydrate, energy expenditure, but the other thing that I've seen an emergence of in kind of pro shops as well, and I don't know what it's like at Redbourne, Lewis, but I'm coming down this week, mate, so we might be able to get a game of golf in, is the emergence of protein shakes and kind of protein bars in the clubhouse.
Yeah.
Is protein important for something like golf?
Well, Luke, protein is important for life. So if it's important for life, it's going to be important for golf. I think, what you've got to remember is when you think about your muscle mass, if you look at your arm now, this is borrowing a phrase from Luke Van Loon, one of the world leaders in protein. It turns over at a reasonable rate. So if you look at your arm now, good look at it, because in 90 days' time, there's going to be no of them original muscle proteins left within it. And it being constantly broken down, and so it's going through muscle protein breakdown and new coming in muscle protein synthesis. And that is based on the protein foods that we're eating. So you literally are what you eat. We can label up protein. You drink it or eat it. 3 hours later, take a muscle biopsy, and that's now your muscle. So we are constantly doing this. From the world of golf then, so then why do we need protein during a round? Well, it's going to really not do a great deal for your performance in that moment. But we know that the body wants a regular supply of protein throughout the day. So if you've not eaten for an hour before a round, you're then spending 5 hours on a round, and then you're not going to be home for another hour after that. That's 7 hours that the body hasn't seen any protein. And we know that that's not optimal. So that's probably why at the elite end, I want my athlete to have like a chicken wrap or something at the turn. So I've given them some protein mid-round for that muscle growth and support. But we also know that the immune system needs a ready supply of amino acids to mount an immunoresponse. And if we're low in protein, we can't then handle illness as well as what we should do. And there's many health-related factors. Now, does that mean you need a protein shake? Well, it depends, and that's a horrible answer. Most athletes I work with, I aim to get them on 2 grams of protein per kilogram body mass. So if you're an 80-kilo golfer, I want you on 160 grams a day of protein. That's one of the issues. The next thing is I want that 160 grams spread evenly throughout the day as probably 4 40-gram doses. So some breakfast in the morning, lunch, mid-afternoon, and then something later on in the day. If a protein shake means that that's the easiest way for you to hit that target on the in the day and you don't like taking food onto a golf course, so a protein shake mid-round, so be it. But I'm not convinced it's going to physically help you in that moment to play better golf, but it will potentially help in your long-term eating goals, if that makes sense.
Protein can make you feel fuller. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, it's one of the
When you
high
take on
satiety
protein.
foods. Yeah, and that's why it can be helpful for those who are trying to control appetite. That and vegetables. I think are the two big things for appetite regulation. So if you used to eat, I don't know, something like a chocolate bar, you're very rarely full, are you? Half an hour later, where if you used to have like some chicken and vegetable wrap, then the chances are you are going to have a feeling of satiety for much longer. But yeah, good point.
So what one point that I kind of want to make is we've spoken a lot about kind of chicken wraps as being the way to get your nutrition. Now, I'm a vegetarian, and I know that some people won't or might not have the opportunity to have chicken wraps on a day. So what kind of other potential options would be useful to kind of get carbohydrates in and also to get kind of that protein related aspect in?
Yeah, it's a good question, and you're not the only vegetarian or are you vegetarian or vegan?
Vegetarian. I couldn't give up cheese. That's my problem.
Okay, eggs.
Eggs, yeah, I eat eggs.
Yeah, so obviously we've got some good sources there. Um, edamame beans are a really good source of protein, and then there's things like the extra firm tofu and things like that. So there's still plenty of ways to do it. If I said that the options in a golf shop are limited, the plant-based protein options in a golf shop are going to be really limited. So for somebody like yourself, it'll be much more of a case of being organised and bringing your own with you. We do make sure that there is always a plant-based grab and go option available in the players' lounges because we do have the occasional player who does follow that way of eating as well. So can be done, just takes a little bit more planning.
Gotcha, gotcha. So we've covered quite nicely, I think, carbohydrates, proteins, and the last kind of we've covered hydration quite well, I think, as well. But we'll come on to get some strategies and practical elements around that in a moment's time. Just before we move on to that kind of practical strategies, I just wanted to ask a question because I know this is another kind of, I don't want to call it food group because I don't think that's the right term. You could probably tell that through my degrees, I haven't covered nutrition. I tried to jump on a module when I did my masters, but they wouldn't let me do it because I was more focused on biomechanics and physiology, like for example. So, but fats, are fats really a good thing? We always kind of get this general kind of thought processes, I guess, that fats are bad and we should avoid fats. Is that the case? And is that, well, I guess that might be prevalent within the sandwiches you're potentially suggesting in the snacks.
Yeah, look, fats has had a bad rap, haven't they? Unfortunately, and they need a good PR agency to try and get them um, back. And Luke, I think the difficulty in the whole fats area is the different types of fats, and if we are to reduce them, what do we replace them with? So there's a couple of things that probably need to explore there. But the first one is this concept that fats are bad and avoid them from the diet. Well, look, there's essential fatty acids that you don't eat, you die. So let's just get to the point that there are certain things like the omegas, omega 3, 6, etc., that are absolutely essential for life. And to remove all fats from your diet it is a really, really bad idea.
Yep.
The low fat movement started to try and help with weight loss because fat per gram have the highest calories at 9 kilocalories a gram compared with 4 in carbohydrates. But that was just quite a naive way of looking at it. I think there's certainly, and this is where we now get controversial. Everything I've said so far, I think, is pretty non-controversial. Now we get to a point where people disagree, and that is the types of fats that are actually good for you. Now, traditionally, we've talked about the difference between saturated and unsaturated fats. So you're unsaturated being vegetable oils, olive oil, things like that, and you're saturated being meat, butters, and things like that. And I think that's where there still is controversy about, um, you know, I think the general consensus is the unsaturated is probably the healthier one. You know, your oil, your the olive oils, etc. But there is a school of thought that actually the saturated fats, particularly ones from natural sources like butters and meats, aren't probably as bad as what we maybe thought they used to be. There's a certain class of fats that I don't think anyone disagrees is a bad one, and these hydrogenated or trans fats.
Yeah.
Now, fortunately, a lot of people are removing these from foods anyway. So these are things that naturally should be a liquid at room temperature, but for convenience have been partially hydrogenated and become solid at room temperature. And what we a decade ago were told were healthy, so like margarines, switching from butter to margarines, and actually we know that that's a really problematic thing. The other thing is if you remove saturated fat and replace it with refined sugar, I think the balance of the evidence is you're doing more harm than good there. So if you just remove butter from a diet and replace it with sugar, so you look for a low fat food on a shelf and you read the label and it is low fat, but you've got to replace it with something. If you replace it with sugar, that's probably a bad thing to do. I think when it comes to fats, you just need to look at it, and if it looks healthy, it probably is. So if you look at a plate that's got nuts and avocado and things like that on it, I don't think we need to worry about the type of fats in that. If you're looking at like deep fried rubbish in rubbish oils, then I think we've got a bit of a concern there. So I kind of sat on the fence, and actually, I think there's a lot of good stuff, and things like salmon. I know you don't eat meats, but the omega threes and all the relationship between omega three and heart health. You know, there's a lot probably more goodness there than we need to worry about. So yeah, had a bad press, but I think the press is changing.
Okay. So let me try and kind of summarize what we've been talking about in some ways. So we've been talking about, from a golfing perspective, we want to get kind of protein fed throughout the day. So some protein before, some protein during, some protein after.
Yep.
We want to have regular kind of carbohydrate feeding. Try not to get that from very sugary stuff, but more kind of, what's the word you'd use there, Graham?
Yeah, we're talking about lower glycemic index, so it's not causing a big spike in. Sure, it's more sustained release. Yeah.
Gotcha. So, and then we're trying to incorporate that throughout. And then the bit that we've spoke about too is also about that when you have things that are very high energy drinks like Coke or potentially a sports drink, they often have these kind of high sugars, but then also they sometimes, when we're trying to say here, with the sports drinks, I can't remember what I was saying with them now, but the fact with those is, oh yeah, that was it. The actual certain elements in them, maybe around the sodium aspect, which you guys spoke about. So as a general picture, then does that quite well summarise kind of what we spoke about so far?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And maybe the last thing we touched on then is, let's not get too obsessed with removing all fat from a diet. There's certainly good fats in things like salmon, avocados, nuts, seeds, grains, olive oils, etc. So, yeah, I think that's a decent summary.
Perfect. And then, so thinking about from a strategy perspective, we've obviously covered some of these strategies so far, but kind of what would you kind of recommend golfers to do then? Pre-round, during the round, you've spoken before about 4, 10, 14. Just give us a little bit of understanding around those strategies then.
Yeah, so obviously, where possible, we want them to feed well, pre-round, and that'll be what we touched on before. So, having a good source of protein. So, I'm a big fan of omelets. I'm a big fan of eggs in many ways, scrambled eggs and smoked salmon, things like that. And then a decent low GI, sustained release of carbohydrates. So, big fan of porridge and things like that. So a lot of golfers will be having maybe some overnight oats or a porridge or something like that. for breakfast, and then with some eggs and that. And then, you picked up on. I try and give him a strategy for on the course. So, a simple one is, I've said there before, 10, 14. So, eating something at 4 and 10 and 14, with carbohydrates coming at all three and protein coming in the middle. In terms of hydration, just getting them into a habit. And I've said before, of when the putter goes in the bag, maybe the water bottle comes out, and just getting into that habit so you don't forget to keep on top of your hydration, because sometimes with all the things going on you can forget. And then when you finish the round, we talk about the 3 hours of recovery. So replace, repair, and rehydrate. So replace, we'd want a good source of carbohydrates in there, whether it's rice or potatoes or something like that. Repair, so we're going to need some protein and some vegetables. So whether it's some fish, I'm a big fan of salmon post round. So salmon, vegetables, and rice might be a really nice recovery, not burger and chips. And then rehydrate, because even with the best intentions on a particularly hot day, the chances are that you will still be slightly dehydrated. So we need to rehydrate. If you're in the fortunate position you can weigh yourself, we talk about for every kilo in weight lost, replace it with 1.5 litres of fluid with electrolytes added and things like that. If you're not, just be aware of monitoring your urine for the next few hours. So, it should be clear, it should be odourless. If it's dark and smelly, the chances are we're a bit dehydrated and we need to do something about it.
One question I do want to ask is, at this moment, is where does beer fit into this? So we know that often when golfers finish a round or pre-round, they might have a beer. Is that a bad idea?
Look, if you're asking me, are you asking me from a physical or a mental perspective?
There's two camps, isn't there?
Yeah. There's a guy called Ben Desborough from Australia, a really good scientist, and he's actually done some nice research on the very low alcohol beers and rehydration. And actually, if it's a low enough alcohol content, the diuretic effect of beer isn't probably going to be more than the actual fluid you've consumed. So if you have like 400-500 mils of a 1% beer, then you're not going to have a diuretic effect. But look, if you're going perfect scenario, it probably wouldn't fit in. There's probably nowhere. If you're talking about relaxation and mental side of things, and in the evening having a glass of wine or a beer with your dinner to as a relaxation, like Zach said at the beginning, the moderation, but in moderation, it's unlikely to be doing a great deal of harm. If you're throwing a skinful in, well then it's after quitting smoking, putting shed loads of alcohol, and it's probably the next biggest thing you can do to improve your long-term health. So yeah, I think we can argue that you can make room for the occasional glass of wine and beer, but yeah, 2 or 3 glasses of wine a night as a habit, I wouldn't be advocating.
Gotcha. So the thing that I'm thinking about, a lot of the listeners of this will likely be PGA pros. So what I'm kind of thinking is, well, from this, what can clubs do on a club level to really kind of help promote better nutrition in the players? And one thing straight off the bat, I guess, is just thinking about what they're offering in the pro shop, I guess, potentially for food and drink. And then potentially thinking about the menu that they offer at the club, and is there an option or like a side menu that's good for health? Are those kind of things you think realistic for clubs to think about?
Yeah, I think so. It wouldn't be that difficult to on your menu have your traditional one, because look, who doesn't like a Sunday morning pre-round bacon and egg barm and a burger and chips when we finish? Look, and golfers, let's not take away. This government's taking enough fun away from our life. Let's not take away every last drop of fun that we have. Sorry, we're going to get political though. I'll stop that. Yeah, but I don't see any harm in the menus having a performance section.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got a young aspiring golfer who gets to the course and wants some breakfast, there maybe is like an omelette or some porridge or something like that they can have in the morning. There could be, isn't that hard to have some frozen berries, some yogurt, etc. in the kitchen, and you could order a performance smoothie before you go out. And then when you come back in, it wouldn't be that hard to have a couple of decent options on the menu, like a salmon rice type dish. So you could order off the performance one. And I think labelling it that way, that you've got the standard menu and you've got the golf performance menu, um, and then even an ability to, even if it was a pre-order, that it's not that hard for the chef to make some nice, like, we have our chef make granola bars, banana breads, things like that to take on the course, and it wouldn't be that hard to have that available in the clubhouse. But yeah, I think having both menus would be a nice thing. And look, there was a few years ago there was a cafe in Ireland when I worked with Munster Rugby. I think it was called Delish. It was a really good cafe, and a lot of our players were going in there for breakfast or even post training for food. So one of the players asked me, would I go in and speak to the owner about putting together a Munster rugby menu just for the Munster players? And we came up with all sorts of mad names. Like Jerry Flannery was playing there at the time, and one of the meals was called Jerry's Gone Nuts because it was scrambled eggs made in peanut butter, just a high calorie thing. And the purpose of this story was that they had that menu, and then the regular guests started saying, could I order off a Munster menu? And before you know it, more were ordering off the healthy Munster menu than we're ordering off what was already a healthy menu anyway to start with, because it was a really nice deli type cafe. I miss going there, by the way. If anyone's in Ireland, in Limerick, they've got to go to Delish. It was brilliant. But yeah, I think that what you would find is that eventually people will morph towards the health. If what you did was change it from burger and chips overnight to salmon and rice, you would get objections. But if for a time period you offered both, I imagine what you eventually see is more moving towards the better option.
Yeah, I'm also thinking. Go on, Zach. There you go.
I just kind of wanted to contribute to what Graham was describing, because I think he's right, and I also think that it could be driven a bit faster if what he was alluding to happens across the board, and it's not just the inclusion of the items, but the framing of them too, because it ties back to what Graham was describing around understanding. If I see a healthy item where without context, I may more easily pass it over for the burger and chips than if there was an entire section that was described as, I don't know, golf performance, because now my inclinations toward it are twofold as opposed to, a single, which is based purely on the ingredients involved. And I also think that, just general education on the courses in little spits and spurts. I saw a statistic the other day that said 65% of the golf courses in the United States have either invested or beginning to invest in fitness and wellness amenities on all of their courses. Part of that budget could be put towards little flyers explaining, little things like, why is magnesium good for your golf game? If you're deficient in it, it will exacerbate conditions of anxiety and depression and so on and so forth, right? So injecting tidbits of nutritional knowledge on your menus, like in your clubhouses, like have a little poster board, just kind of with the nutritionists injecting information here or there with suggestions for why or how one could go about achieving them, can go a long way to shifting just general thought processes. And then if the options are available, that can help drive them towards those options. Similar to Graham's story of the restaurant where everybody started wanting, the monster menu.
Yeah. So, and I think I could help a little bit there with my contacts, and something I might need to think about where, if we could start publicising and letting golf clubs put on the menu, this is what Rory eats pre-round, this is what Tommy eats post-round. So then what you're now doing is educating everybody, but I think the youngsters and the aspiring golfer were like, well, that's what Rory eats pre-round, I want to eat that.
Yeah.
And now the youngsters will eventually become the senior players in the club, and now it's passed through. So I think that would be a good way to try and help people, just by getting more awareness of what the real elites do and why they do it. As Zach said, not just the what, but the why.
Yeah. Well,
Excellent.
that's all great stuff. I think that's really good messages to kind of go away with as well, on that kind of nutrition piece that we've been talking about, and some things that I guess clubs can really practically, if they want to make change and they want to kind of help not only the health but also the performance of golfers, some nice changes they can implement with not much difficulty by the sounds of it, something that's relatively easy for them to do.
And they're really in the position of being the true stewards of the game, right? And like Graham was saying, back in the day, it wasn't the game that it is today. But because the game has changed, it's I really see it up to the golf courses to help instill that change in the wider audience that be, because they're the closest to the pulse of all the new players.
Yeah, indeed. So, Graham, before we move on to the quickfire round, I just had one more question around athletes that you've worked with. Is there certain athletes that you're able to tell us who've had the biggest change in their diet? Or Bryson, for example, he's obviously somebody who's put a lot of weight on the last few years. I assume part of that is also due to his diet. So have you got any athletes that you think has really changed their mindset specifically around nutrition?
I don't know about changing the mindset really. I think there's a lot of, I've worked with a lot of really good high profile golfers who have really embraced it and treat it as seriously as they do everything else. I'm very careful like name dropping and things like that, because obviously we've got a lot of athlete client confidentiality. But I don't think someone like Tommy Fleetwood would mind me saying that he takes it very seriously. We have regular chats. He's often asking what's the best thing to eat on the golf course. And what's really great about Tommy is he's got his own academy, and he's asking me about how can I help educate the next generation of kids coming through, because he wants, not only does he see the importance of it, he's really passionate about growing the game and helping the youngsters as well. So I think he's a good one who we can, and I've worked with Tommy now for almost a decade, and certainly fuels rounds very well. But you're right, some people, some of these I've worked with, and some I haven't. But you look at someone like Matt Fitzpatrick again, who takes his nutrition very seriously, looks incredibly athletic now. I think he's done some great work with some strength and conditioning coaches over the years. His driving distance has come on. His concentration on the course seems to be as good as anybody's, and I know that he takes every aspect of his game seriously, including his nutrition. And I don't work with Matt at the moment. I have done in the past. He's got other nutrition support at the moment, other world-class nutrition support, I should add. So that's not just me blowing my own trumpet, but that's giving a rap to someone who's gone out and gets great advice and takes it really seriously. And I think we've seen a physical developing in somebody like Matt as well. And I think it's resulted in in being one of the world's greatest players. So yeah, I could use multiple examples. And you said Bryson, who you got to love him, haven't you? You've got to love how he is willing to innovate and experiment, whether that's in technology or within his own body and his own frame. And clearly, it's a ball of million miles. So yeah, I think that there's lots and lots of great examples, and we're even seeing people you wouldn't think take nutrition seriously now embracing it and trying really hard to make major changes. And I'll just, without naming names, I'll just leave it at that. But some people you would never think are now really on board.
Gotcha. Fellas, any questions from you two before we move on to the quickfire round?
I'm all good. I think you've covered so much, and again, I've learned a lot. I've made about 2 pages of notes. Yeah, gonna see if I can keep it in my brain for the next few days now.
I'm just happy to hear that the tides are changing in nutrition and golf, because as a company in the nutrition space for golf, it's sometimes like pulling teeth talking to many people about nutrition or getting them to care. So just one of those things.
Well, great stuff. So let's move on to the quickfire round then before we finish up with the episode today. So, Graham, this is directed at you. So this section is effectively where you and I get to voice our annoyances in golf. So effectively, we play a game of what annoys you the most on the golf course, and I'm going to provide you with two options, and you just have to choose which one you think is the most annoying. Okay?
Okay.
So, first things first. Which is most annoying? Waiting on the tee or no sand in a bunker?
Waiting on the tee.
Waiting on the tee. Okay.
Yeah.
Not a fan of slow golf then.
Not a fan of slow golf, and if you're going to bunker, it's your own fault.
Okay, like it. Cool, alright, so sticking with that then, so you chose waiting on the tee. So, is it that, or is it people using buggies in wet conditions in the winter?
Ooh. Personally, I'd still say waiting on the tee, but if I put a more good for the game, wet buggy, them who don't need it using buggies. I'm all for equality and inclusion, and if you need a buggy to get around a golf course, then great. But them who don't need it, because using a buggy, I would say, yeah, them who don't need it. But let's just say if you do need it, I think everyone should be able to enjoy this great game.
Of course, we're flipping over to buggies, yeah?
Yeah.
Cool. Right then. On the third point then, is it the buggies using wet conditions in the winter, or seeing pitch marks on the green from the previous group who's just in front of you?
I'd say pitch marks, because it's just so lazy, isn't it?
Yes,
So
totally agree.
lazy. And you know what? Most of us aren't good enough to make them all the time, so celebrate it. I do it as a badge of honour, but have it a great approach shot.
Yeah, and the annoying thing is that they're also probably the kind of people who, if they got to a green and saw the pitch marks, they'd be really annoyed that they were there in their line. So, I totally agree. Cool, and then finally, this is one of my bugbears within golf, which I get it because people are walking around the course. So let's say I'm playing at Woburn the other week, and they have nice country paths around the outside of the forests. But then you get people who are just walking, having a nice walk, but just nattering away when you're trying to hit your golf shot. So are you sticking with the fact of the pitch marks on the green, or is it the people who are walking around the course who don't play golf but are chatting away while you're hitting the golf ball?
I'm on still for pitch marks, and I can justify that on multiple levels. But one, golfers should know better, where people walking around the course maybe shouldn't. And two, as a former rugby player, you know, I've been used to taking goal kicks with people throwing things at me and, you know, really heckling and abusing you as you're lining up your goal kick. So a little bit of chatter doesn't bother me at all.
Great stuff. So on that one then, obviously pitch marks win out. Have you got an additional kind of annoyance on the course that you want to raise before we finish?
I think I maybe surprised myself. For me, it's the slow play unnecessary when people get ready golf and even that walking around. I mean, it's changing now, isn't it? But this is it me or you and walking around the green? Well, I think it might just be you. Well, I don't know. It might just be me, and just hit the ball in the hole and get on with it. You know, golf should be 3 to 4 hours for me, and I moved from a golf club because Saturday comps was 5 to 6 hours, and it was just painful, you know. And keep the pace of play.
I often just go in and teed off around about 3 o'clock with my missus, and we just zoom round. We get round in like 2 hours 45, 3 hours, and we're done.
Yeah. Well, a good friend of mine who I play golf with, he works night shifts, so I often meet him at the course at like 5 a.m, 5:30 when he finishes a night shift, and we'll have a game. I'll be back home for breakfast with the kids, and we've had a 2.5 hour round, and for me that's perfect.
Brilliant. Great stuff. Well, thanks for joining us today. It's been a really great discussion, Graham. I think we've got a lot of information out of that. We've really kind of wrung you out in some of that information, and I think we've got some really useful things for coaches to think about within their club, and also golfers thinking about what they should eat on the course. So thanks for being on. Really appreciate it.
No problem at all. No problem.
And as I said earlier, you've got a number of different papers, chapters, all these kind of things to discuss. So it'd be great to have you back on in the future to discuss one of those research papers.
Yep, no problem at all. And we've just in the process of getting a PhD funded by the DP World Tour and a few others to do more research in golf. So when I said at the beginning there's not a lot of research, watch this space. We will be contributing to that golf nutrition research in the very near future.
Amazing. So where can people find you, our listeners find you on social media?
Yeah, I'm not that hard to stalk, really. If you on Twitter, it's close_nutrition. Instagram, it's just close nutrition. And if you just Google Graham Close Nutrition, all my university details and all that comes up. So yeah, I'm quite easy to find.
Great stuff. So Zach, thanks for joining us as well. Really great to get some of your questions and your thoughts and some of the information around nutrition from you as well. So really appreciated. Thanks for coming on today.
No, absolutely, and thanks for having me. It was a bit of imposter syndrome sitting with Graham on this.
No, it was great to speak, Zach. Thank you.
Great stuff. And Zach, where can people find you as well?
Well, you can find us at driveforce.golf. Our Instagram is driveforcegolf, all over our social media. And yeah, I mean, I encourage any player or clinician such as Graham just to look at our product and evaluate it from an ingredient standpoint. I think that, as far as sports nutrition goes, it's the product that golfers have needed for a while.
Good stuff. So, Zach, thank you very much. And Lewis, again, thanks for joining me again, mate. It's been great to have you on.
Absolute pleasure. Always nice to see your face, Dan. And obviously spending time with Graham and Zach today, a lot of knowledge bombs were dropped. And like I said, I've made loads of notes and learning lots. So it's a real pleasure to spend time around you guys. So thank you for that.
Perfect. And where can our listeners find you again?
On Instagram, it's Lewis Downey Golf Pro. Nice and easy.
Perfect. So that's it for episode 3 of the Golf Science Podcast. In the next episode, we will be speaking to Dr. Tony Luczak from the University of Mississippi. He is an assistant research professor at the National Strategic Planning and Analysis Research Center, and we'll be talking to him about his paper on the challenges of using 2D versus 3D for golf coaches. So that's all from the Golf Science Podcast. If you want to learn more about the science of golf, visit my website at sciencecaddy.com, where you'll find golf science articles, videos, and online webinars. So until next time, I've been your host, Daniel Thompson, your caddy for all things golf science.